Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everybody, and welcome back to Sanphar Biosecurity program. Today we are about a little bit more than 70 persons registered, representing about 15 countries. So thank you for your presence and your time. Our objective, as from the day one, is to bring you biosecurity closer and alive to your operation, and therefore biosecurity reinforced and hopefully securing your business continuity. So the program is comprising of 9 short session webinars scheduled monthly on biosecurity best practices. So we kick off the session, the program, in January with the general aspect of biosecurity. The February, we went through the 5 principles of a good biosecurity plan. Then we went into the external biosecurity. So part 1 was about purchasing and transport of animals, quarantine period, how to dispose the carcasses also was there. And in April, the last month, we got to go through the feed, water, and surrounding of the farm. So to achieve that, we have invited the best in class in biosecurity from the veterinary faculty of Ghent University in Belgium. By the way, and we are very proud of it, they have been nominated top of veterinary faculty for 4 years in a row. So the Department of Epidemiology is led by Professor Joran de Wolf, who has spent about 20 years in prevention disease field with focus on the application of biosecurity. He has published a book on it and also on the subject of reduction of antibiotic usage. He is assisted by Nele, Dr. Nele Caekebeke. Since 2017, Nele has been very involved around antimicrobial usage reduction too, and training the international public. She's part of the BioSec team. Andy Vervat, newly to the team and contributor to the development of e-learning module of the biosecurity. And we have from Vilofoss, our Dr. Plamen Nikolov, our specialist, field specialist in biosecurity. Dr. Nikolov brings more than 20 years of experience in animal health, nutrition, biosecurity, with lots of field experience worldwide. And he loves sharing, of course, the application benefit of his preferred powder disinfectant called Stalosan F, and as a tool to support your biosecurity plan. So the webinar, as I mentioned, 30 minutes. We kick off with the presentation first for the 2 presentations. And during the presentation, if you have burning question, there is an application there, you can put your question. At the end of the presentation, we will come back and go through a Q&A session, okay? And if we don't have time to answer everything, you will get the answer on Sanphar website very shortly after, okay? So right now, we are going into the webinar number 5. So external biosecurity part 3. So this is the last leg of the external biosecurity. And Dr. Nele Caekebeke will bring us through the entrance control topic, how to organize a decent hygiene locks, and which step does one need to take before entering the premises. Okay, so Dr. Nele, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Harry, for the introduction. So hello, everyone, and already welcome on the 5th webinar, as Harry just mentioned. So indeed, this will be the last part focusing on external biosecurity. and this will focus on all measures related to entrance control of visitors and personnel or employees. So we all know that pathogens can spread between animals and humans, but usually we look at animals as a source of infection for humans. But to keep our animals safe, we need to look at the human or the visitors who can be an intruder to our farm and the risk of infection for your valuable animals. Now, how to protect your farm from the people, the visitors coming in and maybe bringing in infections will be, as Harry already mentioned, the topic of today's session. Now, visitors can spread infections in different ways. Humans, visitors can act as a mechanical vector as one, and then this means that they can transmit pathogens through previous contact with infectious animals. Imagine, for example, that your veterinarian, that he visited another farm earlier today. And there on that specific farm, he has come into contact with a diseased animal, and excreta from that animal, feces, for example, will be in contact with the veterinarian, and it will come on his boots, on his clothes. And now imagine that veterinarian is coming to your farm later that day with the same boots, with the same clothing. Then you can imagine that your veterinarian will be a cause of bringing infections to your farm. But humans can also act as a biological vector, and that's when a pathogen can infect both humans and animals. Think about influenza virus, staphylococcus, salmonella, for example. Then the human is actually the spreader of the infectious particle in water itself. And then also, of course, the visitor can come into contact with diseased animals on your farm, and then maybe go to other susceptible animals on your farm, and then by having direct contact can also spread infections. So for those reasons, it's important to limit the contact between your animals and visitors, whatever kind, as much as possible. So actually to keep visitors and humans in general as far away as possible from your animal premises. But of course, we all know from time to time you have a visitor that needs to come to your farm. Think about a veterinarian again, or maybe the inseminator, a technician, the person delivering the feed. From time to time, of course, it's necessary that someone comes to your farm. And whenever that's happening, it's very important to take the correct measures to prevent the introduction of disease through that way. So at first, it's very easy, or the first step is to completely seal off your farm. So ideally, if you have a fence or a barrier surrounding your farm, it's quite easy, if you can imagine, to keep visitors or unwanted people out. So no one can coincidentally just come into your farm or enter your farm premises without you knowing. This is also helpful to keep certain wild animals out, of course, the large ones. It will also help to keep those animals away, but also the people who need to be on your farm. When there's a closed gate, they won't be searching for you, the farmer or one of the employees, and just go from one stable to another. If they cannot access the farm, they have to call you or ring the doorbell, and then you can come to collect the person, and you have control on which places your visitor is going. So ideally, at first, it's good to have a nice closed off farm premises. And when people are entering your farm at first, of course, when they come with a certain vehicle, it's the idea to keep that vehicle as far away as possible from your farm premises. But when they want to enter your animal premises and come into contact with your animals, there are certain general rules that apply. And ideally it is that all stables, all houses should only be accessible through a hygiene lock. So people cannot skip the lock. For those of you not familiar with the term, a hygiene lock is actually just a separate building, or maybe just a designated area within a building or a stable where people can change their footwear, change their clothes, and wash their hands. So actually, this hygiene lock, oh, I'm sorry, that was a wrong button. So the hygiene lock will act as some sort of barrier between the outside of the farm and the inside. And ideally, there's just one like big lock where people have to enter before they can come into your farm, really. But in the ideal situation, you will have multiple hygiene locks. Think about a poultry farm, for example. If you have multiple houses, ideally you will have a hygiene lock in front of each house. The same applies for pig, for example. For example, you might have different stables interconnected with each other. But if you go, for example, from the south to the nurturing unit, it's in the ideal situation, you will have some sort of hygiene lock where you can change footwear, clothes, and wash your hands. We will come back to this in a later webinar where we are discussing the different compartments within a farm. But in the ideal scenario, you will have different hygiene locks, small hygiene locks within the different age categories or different houses. Because of course, take the pig example again, you can imagine your sows and your piglets, there's a huge difference in the susceptibility of those animals. Your sows are older, they have come into contact with a lot more pathogens or infections. They might not even get sick from them, but they have come in contact with them. Whether your piglets will be still quite naive and don't have had a lot of contact with different pathogens, making them more susceptible. That's the idea behind it. But we will come back to this in one of the following webinars. Now, I will go over with you to the different steps that should be taken when entering a farm premises, or when entering the farm, and of course when you're going back. On the right of your screen, you see an image of a hygiene lock or a scheme where all the different elements are indicated. And on the top, you see the part where you will enter the farm premises, so actually the clean area. And on the bottom, that's where you as a visitor will come in, and it will be the first part that you'll see. And the first thing that actually could be quite important is to make sure that all your visitors will sign or register that they have visited your farm. If nothing is happening, it's often something that is just forgotten, or it's not something that the farmer will do anything with. But you can imagine if there's an outbreak, definitely think about African swine fever nowadays, or even the avian influenza. Now it's already better in Belgium where I live, but it's very important to have a register to know who has been on a specific farm on which date and which time. Because when there is an outbreak, then you can start calling people and make sure that you can retrace all the people that came into contact whenever you would, when it appears that you are infected with a certain endemic or epidemic disease. So depending on the farm, it can be really a dedicated form, a dedicated log book, let's say, but it can also just be written down on the chart from the farmer. I also see this a lot, the chart where they keep all daily information of the animals. It's just important that it is there, no matter what shape or size. It's just important to have a register of all people entering and leaving. And then next, when you have registered your name, of course, you will remove your own jacket, your own footwear. Maybe you have bags with you. That's all kind of things that should be kept within the first part of the hygiene lock. And then, very important, you should ask all visitors to wash their hands. The washing of hands is such a simple and useful measure, but unfortunately is very often forgotten. If you remember, for those of you already present from the start, we saw in the second webinar on the principles of biosecurity that the hands of people can pose a very high risk for transmitting disease, because of course this is the part of your body where you will be touching animals if you're a veterinarian or an inseminator. So it's very important to wash your hands. And although it's so important, a lot of people, they won't do it for whatever reason. But it is very important to do it before you enter the animal premises and also when you leave. But I will come back to that in a minute. And it's also recommended, which I also already mentioned, to wash your hands in between different age group. Think about the sows and the nursery piglets, for example. On your screen here, you see, of course, I think you can already guess this, not the best examples of hand washing facilities. On the left, you see that clearly the person or the farm where this is located, they were not using the sink because there's all kind of junk and needles in there. So this is a situation which we rather not see. The same on the right. We see a broken sink, it's dirty, so you're not, as a visitor, not appealed to wash your hands in these kind of sinks. So what we prefer to see is things like this, so just clean, easy taps, or the one in the middle, the systems where you have a pump system where you not even have to touch anything with your hands. For disinfection, for example, those are the things you prefer to see. So just a place where you can have water and soap and also a disinfectant. Then after you have washed your hands, it really depends on the farm, of course, or maybe there is a shower, then maybe the hand washing can be skipped. Or if there's not a shower, this would be the time where you would go from the dirty to the clean zone in the hygiene lock. So these are some examples of the bench which you just saw in the scheme. In some farms, it's really a bench, something where you can sit on and yeah, bring your legs from one side to another. On the picture on the right hand side of your screen, you see that this farmer just has a slot of wood which he put on the floor as some kind of physical barrier. Because I should mention that having a physical barrier, just something, it does not have to be the 60 centimeter or what was it in the scheme, but just having a physical thing, something that you really have to move or put your feet up to get there, it makes more sense than having a tape or a line on the floor, because then people will easily forget where the clean and dirty zone is. And it's so easy to just go over it without thinking about the measures that you should take. So it's something that we see if people have really a physical barrier in whatever shape or form, that is better and people are more aware of the measures they have to take. Now, when you would have a hygiene lock with a shower, you see here some examples of showers that we're actually quite used to at home. So just a normal shower that people could have at home are often seen in a hygiene lock, but these are not the best to have there. Why not? Well, you have a clear distinction in your hygiene lock between clean and dirty, and you see in these showers that there's just one entrance. So you will go in on one side and you will go out at the same side. So there's no clear differentiation between clean and dirty. On the picture on the right, I'm not sure whether it's clear enough. The farmer tried to make some sort of barrier. So the idea would be that you will go in the front and then go back on the right for your in your view. So it's already better than nothing, but it's not the most ideal situation. Preferably, and actually quite easy to make, it may sound as a bit of a work, but it's not that much of a deal, I would say, is to have these walk-through showers. So actually just a shower with two doors or two entrances, where you can go in, remove your own clothes, get in the shower, and then on the other side you will find farm-specific clothes and you will just go out on the other end. That's the most ideal, because then you really have a certain flow from dirty to clean and you will never have to cross a certain area. So again, in this scheme, you see here the shower with an entrance and an exit. So that's the most ideal situation. And then, of course, as I already mentioned, you will put on a specific coverall for the farm and also some boots which you will clean and disinfect. Normally they should be clean from the previous user, but you never know. So it's best to check it and again to disinfect them. Because I really want to emphasize this is that when we're talking about having farm-specific clothes and boots, this applies not only to the visitors. So I mentioned visitors can be a huge risk, and that's of course the case, but you can never forget your own habits, or if you have a bigger farm and you have employees, or maybe your husband, your wife, be aware that you as a person can also be a reason that you can spread diseases. It's not because you're not going to other farms, for example, that you cannot come into contact with wild animals, for example. So please make sure that, or be aware that these advices, these suggestions, or these rules, if you want to call them, should apply to everyone visiting the animals. So all visitors, but also all people working on the farm. And of course, yeah, when I'm mentioning farm specific, maybe I should explain that we mean that you're using coveralls and boots, which you're only using on the specific farm. And even more ideally, as I already mentioned, in a specific house or stable or age group. So you're not using the material or the clothing, the shoes somewhere else. So farm specific clothing and footwear, clean, of course, and also footwear, it's important to disinfect. This will further illustrate this. So a question that we often get is whether it's important to have boots with a flat sole or where it's bad to have them with more of a pattern in. And what we did is already a study from a couple of years ago, but as we made petri dishes, so prints, so we put the petri dish onto the sole of the boot and checked for the amount of bacteria or pathogens that would grow on them. And in both pictures on the bottom, you see on the left, that's the amount of bacteria pathogens that would grow on the dirty boots. So you see the entire gel is covered with bacteria, which is, of course, it makes sense. It doesn't mean those are bad bacteria, but you see it's very dirty. Of course it is. And then in the middle, you see the situation after the boots are cleaned. And there you already see a huge reduction or less amount of bacteria present on the petri dishes. And on the right is a situation after cleaning and disinfection. So there you hardly see anything. The importance of cleaning and disinfection, this will also come back in a following webinar, but just this as an example to show you it is able to clean and disinfect everything, and it is important to do both. If you would only clean, even do it thoroughly, there's still a big chance that some pathogen could remain on the boots, and then you could be, or the visitor could be, the spreader of disease. So there's no excuse for not getting them clean. It's completely, you're completely able to do that. And when we're talking about disinfecting boots, we're often talking about the food baths, like the ones you can see on your screen here. And here it's important to remember to replace the fluids, the disinfectants quite regularly, because they have their specific time of action, and depending where you put them, they can. It's important for to remain active, let's say, to perform their job, to replace the fluid on a regular basis, and also to only use them with clean boots. You can imagine if you would go into them with very dirty boots, then the liquid, the fluid will already be contaminated when only using them once. And it's also, there are a lot of studies or from those people more aware with the working of cleaning and disinfection agents, that the disinfectants will become deactivated from organic materials. So actually what you're doing is already partially, removing the effect of your disinfectant by getting with dirty boots in there. And of course, then you have to replace the fluids every couple of hours. So it's best to use them with already cleaned boots. And then also contact time and temperature is of importance. This depends on the manufacturer, so I cannot put really strict timing or temperature on it because it depends on the product that you can always found on the instructions from the manufacturer. But just to mention that contact time, it's a lot longer than most people do on a regular basis. Most farmers or visitors that I see will just go in maybe for a couple of seconds and then go out. If you think about it yourself, you can imagine that the products cannot do their action within a couple of seconds. It's not possible. So for most products, the contact time is at least 1 minute, maybe 2, which is actually quite a long time that you should be with your boots in the disinfection bath. Some farmers will skip this or be creative with that by putting their boots in the bath when they're finished with a certain section, for example, of the farm, and then they will just keep the boots in there until they will need them again. That's also maybe an idea. But just to mention that the contact time is probably way longer than what you would expect. And then important, what I want to mention with the picture on the bottom is that the managing of those food baths is quite important. If you are using them, please use them correctly, because the question is with the picture on the bottom, whether the bath is rather a disinfection bath or an infection bath. So if it's becoming this dirty and with all these kind of materials in there, question is why would you still use it? And probably it's not for the best to keep using it. And then of course, when you're finished, whatever you meant to do on the farm, you will leave the farm and do actually more or less the same actions, but the other way around, of course. So again, you come into the hygiene lock, and there you will clean and disinfect your boots, put them in the designated area, and remove the dirty coverall. Depending whether it's a disposable one or just a normal one, it will go into the bin or in the laundry. And then again, depending on the hygiene lock, you will go through the shower or over the bench into the first part of the hygiene lock. And then it's again important, as already mentioned, to again wash your hands to make sure that you're not still have something on there, and then you can just put on your own jacket, your own shoes, and maybe sign off from the register, and you're good to go. And then there are just 2 small things that I want to mention, which are a bit of a sidestep. We mentioned the entrance of people and visitors, but what with material? This will come back in one of the following webinars. I think the 7th or the 8th one on the compartmentalization. But a question that we often get is what with paper or cell phones, which you cannot easily clean or disinfect with a liquid, of course. And this is just one of the examples that are existing on the market. It's these kind of boxes where you can put in your cell phone, for example, and they will disinfect certain surfaces with UV light. So there are options to disinfect materials who cannot come into contact with liquids. This is of course quite an expensive system or an expensive tool, so therefore we often advise just keep everything that you own, like cell phones, keys, papers, just keep them out of the animal facilities if you don't need them. And then finally, I just want to mention something short about the downtime, or the amount of time that often a farmer will ask you to not have visited another farm before coming to his or her farm. Some farmers will ask you to 1, 2, or maybe 3 days that you should not have been on another farm before you come to them. And this is based on the idea that an infectious agent can survive on a human for a certain period of time. So the idea of the mechanical vector, the visitor as a mechanical vector, as I mentioned in the beginning, that's the whole idea behind that. And of course, the idea is correct, and it's the case, and it's quite good to discourage people who are not actually very necessary of visiting your farm. It's a good way to discourage them from visiting, but there are actually a lot of studies that indicate that having a certain downtime, it has no additional benefit if you adhere to the rules that I just mentioned. So the changing of clothes, footwear, and washing your hands, then there's actually no additional benefit from having a downtime. But for those of people who have it at site at the moment, please feel free to keep on doing it. But if you were doubting or you're not sure, it's not, from our point of view, from Ghent University, from the biocheck team, we believe it does not have a very, an additional benefit. And there are quite some studies to support this. Okay. So as a take-home message for you guys, just again want to mention that everyone who comes into contact with your animals, being it your own as the owner, the farmer, your personnel, or any kind of visitor, please be aware that you should, or ideally, that you should wear farm-specific and clean clothing each time, and also farm-specific, clean and disinfected footwear. And also, where there's a shower or not, it's very important, and it's so fast and so easy to wash your hands before you enter the animal premises and also when you leave. And just 1 second of your time still, I just want to make a small promotion for the fact that we recently set up our own YouTube channel from the biocheck team. There's not a lot of videos there at the moment, but we're planning a lot more in the future. And you can find all kinds of short videos on information-specific topics regarding biosecurity. So please make sure to check us out and give us a like on one or more of our videos. Thank you so much.
Well done, Nele. So we were looking for practical solution, and you had this 100%, right? So basically, if I understand well, we are talking about human vector, right? So, and I would add to that is imperative that we accept people entering the farm facility with imperative reasons, right? So this will actually make sure that we filter visitors and the numbers. And it is imperative, from my understanding of your presentation, to come in and leave clean, right? So thanks a lot for your presentation. So now let's try to go even closer to the farm with Dr. Nikolov. Dr. Nikolov?
So after the precise and detailed presentation from Nele, I would focus on just a few slides on Stalosan F application in bull baths. This is a picture of Stalosan bull bath used in the farm. And what is the advantage? That actually liquid disinfectants have a weak side. This is a real picture I took from a poultry farm in Bulgaria, where the iodine-based liquid disinfectant was frozen during the winter. Well, luckily with Stalosan, we don't have this problem, and perhaps the best example about that is this trial made by University of Minnesota, which we found accidentally over the internet, and it was really very professionally conducted, and the results are very good. So what was the trial? It was actually to find out the efficacy of different disinfectants against PRRS virus. So for this case, they have used a vaccine against PRRS, and they actually contaminated the boots, the sole of the boots with a typical infection dosage, and afterwards they place the boots into Stalosan bath and synergize in order to simulate on-farm condition. Synergize actually is a glutaraldehyde-based disinfectant, which is quite effective against viruses. Afterwards, the boots were sampled and PCR tested in 1, 3, and 5 minutes to see the results out of the efficacy of the disinfection. Same test was repeated with a manure, which is a typical situation in the farm. They actually place a lot of manure on the boot soles, and then again they have inoculated this manure with the same PRRS vaccine. So those are the results. As you can see on the table 1, they have made a test with 30 degrees Celsius and with different contact time. On the top, you can see the plus, which means that actually this is the test with organic material, the feces on the sole, and minus means that actually the sole of the boots was completely clean. So the effect of disinfection, Stalosan has shown a very good result in presence of organic material, while Synergize or glutaraldehyde-based disinfectant had really a reduced efficacy against PRRS virus. In a completely clean conditions, actually you can see that glutaraldehyde in this case performed very well. The second table represents the same test, but made with minus 13 degrees Celsius. So in this case, actually, you can see that Synergize was frozen. There was no any effect on PRRS virus, while Stalosan, again, performed very well against the virus. So afterwards, they have also made a field conditions trial. So the Stalosan boot baths placed at entry of the site and the entrance of each barn, and they actually vaccinated one barn with animals, and they tested the rest of the animals for presence of PRRS virus. So result was 100% of the boot samples have negative, and the pigs which was not vaccinated against PRRS show again also a negative result against PRRS virus. So if we make a summary, we can say that Stalosan have an excellent efficacy against PRRS virus. Stalosan boot disinfection can provide perfect protection against PRRS transmission, which is the main purpose of preventive application or part of biosecurity. And then Stalosan is effective in a wide range of temperatures and different weather conditions. So it is very important for Europe, especially when during the winter liquid disinfectants freeze, so they are not working at all. So Stalosan can be really a product of choice in this case. Another problem can appear in the summer, where sun rays may inactivate the liquid disinfectant solutions, but Stalosan F also could be a very good replacement for liquid disinfectants during the summer. So I can make a summary that especially for Asia, where the temperatures are regularly high, it is really something very important. The efficacy of Stalosan in presence of organic material is another advantage over the liquid disinfectants. So in this case, actually, you can avoid some organic waste over the boots. So Stalosan will work again very effectively. So Stalosan showed excellent results in real farm conditions. It is proved that it can prevent PRRS transmission through boot cleaning if the liquid disinfectant is neglected. We also have a test against different field pathogen isolates from pig and from poultry. So you can see on the left-hand side in pig pathogens that they are all sensitive towards Stalosan application, even in organic matter load with 3, 5, and 7%. And on the right-hand side, you can see also the poultry pathogens, again, with organic matter, 3, 5, and 7%. And in all cases, actually, Stalosan was very effective against them. So that was the end of my short presentation. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Plamen, for the nice efficacy demo. So you guys have been a bit slow today. So I propose maybe we go through 1 or 2 questions because this is the QA time. So Plamen, let's stay with you 1 minute. And we have a question here. Is it possible to replace the liquid disinfectant for the terminal disinfections with Stalosan F?
Thank you for the question, Harry. Yes, we have this experience. Actually, it is possible to replace liquid terminal disinfection with Stalosan F. And we have this positive experience in Europe during the winter time when it's difficult to wait for drying out the building after washing and then after disinfection. So in this case, actually, Stalosan is again effective, and it is also saves time. Thank you.
Very good. So Nele, one hard one for you. Do you advise on using plastic shoes, shoe cover, and disposable coveralls on top of your clothing instead of farm-specific clothing?
Still muted. Okay, I hope you hear me now. Well, we would say that we prefer I'm not sure how to say it in English, but the real coveralls, the real rubber boots, that we prefer that above coveralls or plastic shoe covers. But of course, for some farms, it's easier to have those disposable ones for visitors. Although you should be aware that it is possible, or chances are actually quite high, that these can rip while you're moving inside the farm, both the covers, the shoe covers and the coveralls. So it is better than not wearing anything extra apart from your own clothing, but I would not say that we would not prefer it over the real rubber boots and coveralls. If you really want to know, we advise people often to wear the coveralls for their shoes, take them off when they are finished in the farm, and then pour some water in them. And you will see that often there are a lot of holes in there. So yeah, for that reason, it's not ideal.
Very clear, Nele. So it's conclusion time, guys. Thank you all for coming with us today and for your time. So see you next month for a rendezvous with Professor Joran de Wolf. So this will be a shifting from external to internal biosecurity, and Professor Joran de Wolf will talk about cleaning and disinfection. So we'll continue with that subject. So why it is important and which steps need to be included in a good cleaning and disinfection protocol. So thank you and see you next month.